So I figured that having gone through the unredacted interviews with Myra Tagler over the last couple of days, that this would be the logical one to move on to in terms of states released interviews. So this time we've got the unredacted version of the video interview with Stephan. Now, some people have listened to this already, and I gather there are a few things in this that we didn't hear before. So it's going to be interesting for me because I've actually not listened through these unredacted versions myself, just waited to do them as a reaction with you guys. Now, I do have a co-host today. Apparently it's so cold that the pup wants to snuggle, so I currently have him snuggled up in my left arm, so you may hear some puppy snoring or puppy noises throughout at least the first part of this video. Now, as with my previous videos, I will be releasing the uninterrupted version of this for those of you who wish to go through that. So I will release that a short while after this one is released. Now, before we actually jump into this video, according to the statistics on my YouTube studio stuff, there's still a lot of people who watch my videos without subscribing. I would dearly love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel. It's free for you, and it just helps to get my channel seen by more people. I'm aiming for that goal of 5,000 subscribers. I know that doesn't sound like much, but to me it seems huge. So if you are new to my channel, if you like what you hear, you can help me out by clicking subscribe. So on that note, let's jump in and have a look at this video interview.
Stephan, how you doing, sir? That's okay. Didn't mean to wake you up.
Straight away, I can already feel my blood pressure going up. I mean, seriously, this whole poor me act, does he really think, after all the interviews that he's already done, that he's going to have any more success with these detectives in terms of acting like the poor little victim?
I'm going to introduce myself. My name's Mark. I work for the Kissimmee Police Department.
Nice to meet you, Mark.
This is Corporal Ilgen.
Brandon.
Hello. I understand you've been here for a little bit. So, just to give you a little bit of background, the reason we are here now is because and yourself reside. Okay. So, initially they thought, since he went to school, dropped off at school, and it would be an Orange County case. It seems like since she lives in, that's the reason we're going to do the case. Okay. You understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the detective's basically playing the nice guy to get Stephan off guard. So what's Stephan doing? He's upping the ante in terms of playing poor little precious Stephan. Notice the way he's suddenly acting like he's so cold, or he's unhappy, or something's wrong, and he wants them to ask him, "Are you okay?" But of course they're not going to play that game.
All right. Let me just grab some things here real quick. All right. I know that you were brought up here by detectives, right? Detectives drove you. Okay. and that was earlier today.
I have no idea how long ago that was.
It was sometime today.
Sometime today, correct.
Now, don't forget that this interview started relatively late in the afternoon, meaning Stephan knows full well what day it is. He's just basically saying that because he thinks that he can make them feel guilty for leaving him sitting in that room for several hours. But of course, the detective's not interested in playing that game. He has more patience than me because I wouldn't have been that patient with him when he's like, I have no idea what day it is. I'd be like, you full well know what day it is. Get over yourself, stop acting like a baby, and let's just get on with the interview.
So, being that you're here, we're here, you were taken here by detectives, I just need to get this out of the way just so we can talk about how we're gone missing or where she may be, okay? All right. Have you ever been in trouble ever in your life?
Yeah.
Okay. Have you ever had your rights read to you at any point in your life?
I must have.
So, at this point in time, Stephan has actually lifted his head up, and when this detective asks him, have you ever had your rights read to you? You can see his eyes flick between the two detectives. He's trying to read the room. He realises he's got to give some sort of answer here. So he's like, I must have. Because he doesn't want to outright say yes. Because he's probably realised that he answered too quickly when he said, yes, he's been in trouble before. And it was probably over that whole knife thing. And he was probably all set to do the I'm the victim. And it didn't go the way he wanted to. He was probably hoping to be able to tell his sob story. But instead, he gets the question, have you had your rights read to you? And he's like looking at both detectives, trying to read the room, basically. So I think it is going to be worth watching what he's doing in terms of which way he's looking through this interview, because it seems like at this point in time, having been totally eviscerated by Detective Tagler, he's a bit more on his guard. He may act a bit dopey, but that's only an effect.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm going to do them again just to get it out of the way, and then we can talk about you take school and stuff like that, okay? All right. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to talk to a lawyer and have him present with you while you're being questioned. If you cannot afford to hire a lawyer, one will be appointed to represent you before any questioning. Do you understand these rights? Okay, perfect.
So you can definitely hear the increased breathing rate there. I think he's suddenly starting to realise that this is getting real.
All right. So before we start talking, one last thing. Can you just raise your right hand? Do you swear and affirm that the statement you're about to give is the truth, nothing but the truth, to the best of your knowledge, so help you God?
Yes.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. Let's talk about your relationship with, and we just talked a little bit. So.
And straight away he goes back to acting the victim. Poor little me, I'm going to do everything in my power now to try and get some sympathy out of you, because I know I'm in deep shit. And the only way I know how to get out of this kind of deep shit is to try and get you to give me sympathy.
How long have you been together?
7 years, 6 or 7 years, close to it.
Where'd you meet her?
Work.
Where was that at?
We worked for a home building company. It's no longer in business, but we were both in the call center area.
Oh, okay. So like selling homes or?
Yeah. We were best friends for about a year before we made it official.
He's trying to make his job sound more impressive than it was, and make it sound like the business was bigger than it was. But at the end of the day, they were working for Stephan's father in Stephan's father's business, basically answering phones. It wasn't a call centre, it was basically they were office staff for Chris Sterns. If you are looking for the documentation for that, I believe it was Grish who covered it on his channel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's where you can find the information about Chris's business. What I would like to know is, during this period of time when they were best friends, did Stephan have access to Maddie at that time? And did he decide to become best friends with Jenn because he knew she had a young daughter?
Gotcha. So you consider you and her boyfriend, girlfriend. Okay. Any engagement plans or anything like that?
No labels, nothing. We were just happy.
Sorry, I know this is going to be a really long video if I interrupt every 2 seconds. But once again, he pulls out the, we were just happy. Like, what a joke. And yeah, of course there's no labels because you guys actually weren't together. Which, had you actually checked on Jenn, well, with Jenn, she would have told you that part of the story.
And how long have you lived in with them? Because I know you said she's lived in for years.
Yeah, off and on for years myself.
Okay. Any family that lives in?
No.
Okay. So on and off, how long do you think you've been?
This stretch, 2 or 3 years.
This guy is such a dumbass if he doesn't realise that these detectives are all communicating with each other and will therefore know that actually he's not currently living with Jenn, but with his parents. So him trying to give the impression that he's still living there when the information is well and truly known is just a complete utter joke.
Okay. Kind of mentioned that you two maybe split up for a little bit in December, you know, and then you moved back to wherever your parents live. And where is that at?
It's in Northport, it's down by Sarasota.
Okay, so on the West Coast.
Yeah.
Got it. All right.
Note the fake yawn when the detective calls him out, basically, for trying to say that him and Jenn were still living together, and the detective immediately, without being overly grumpy about it or anything, just says, so, you're living down with your parents now, right? Basically confirming that. Stephan realises that his lie has failed, and immediately you get the fake yawn from him. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm so tired, I haven't slept in like 3 days. Sorry, make that 394,000 days.
So I understand you had a recently. She had a party Sunday. Is that right?
Sunday, yeah.
Okay.
So
did you come to the party?
No, I was not. I was on my way up at that point.
Okay.
Given that he's playing poor little victim Stephan right now, I don't know why he didn't just continue saying I wasn't invited, rather than switching it to I was on the way up. But clearly in his mind, he didn't want to say anything that might tarnish his brilliant, shiny halo. And he sure as heck didn't want to admit that Jenn's family didn't like him, because that would have led down a whole different track in terms of questioning.
So the party ends. Did you pick them up from the party?
Someone must have dropped her off.
Okay.
She was there when I got there. Asked me to make sure that I was getting into the shower and did her bedtime routines, which she did. She was already on top of it, so nothing to do there.
Okay. What time do you think you got back?
What time I got in there?
Yeah.
Maybe 8 o'clock, 8:30ish, something like that.
And
He knows full well what time he got there. Although I'm wondering if the reason he's saying 8 o'clock, 8:30, is because when you look at the tracking on his phone, it appears that he has actually come from the opposite direction of the townhouse when he finally did go to the townhouse, which makes me question if, actually having discovered that they do have a lot of surveillance of him, maybe he's telling the truth here. Because I can't help wondering if the timing of him arriving back at the townhouse 15 minutes after Maddie is because he knew that Maddie was being dropped off and that he was perhaps stalking out Yolanda's house to see what time Stephanie left, to make sure that he arrived after Stephanie had gone and dropped Maddie off. I think the reason it was a 15-minute wait and not anything shorter than that is because we know from one of the early interviews, one of the body-worn camera interviews, that Stephanie lives nearby and that to get to her place, you would go out the rear gate of the complex. So Stephan probably was waiting after seeing them leave Yolanda's house. Maybe he waited at the front gate of the complex or something to make sure that there was enough time for Stephanie to have been gone. In other words, I think the delay was because there is 2 entrances to the complex and he didn't want to be entering the complex when Stephanie was exiting. Not that she would have recognised the car, but I just get the sense that he didn't want Maddie's or Jen's family to know that he was there.
Apologize if you've answered these questions before. It's just like I said, we're coming into the game late, so I may ask you things that you've already answered probably 3 or 4 times.
I apologize as well. My memory is not super reliable on time frames. I've been medicated for the better part of a week.
Okay, that's fine. What do you take medicine for?
Anxiety mostly. I've been having some money troubles lately. Anxious over that, so.
Sure, Stephan. That's why you were asking your parents on Saturday if they had any medications that you could take. So this is a complete lie of I've been medicated for the better part of a week. He's doing everything he can to try and get sympathy. He's worked his ass off with his body language to try and get them to give him some sympathy. They've ignored that. And, we're talking, this level detectives know how to read body language. They would see what he was doing. So they have ignored that. So now he has to step it up. Oh, poor me, I'm just drugged to the eyeballs because I'm so anxious.
Okay, well, hopefully your money troubles get better.
I've been medicated on Ativan since probably Saturday.
Okay, gotcha.
I always have a little snicker to myself when the detective says, hopefully your money troubles will get better. Because by this point in time, they've got him banged to rights. They know that at the end of this interview, they are going to arrest him. So he's not going to have to worry that much about money troubles after that, other than trying to get Mummy and Daddy to add another $50 onto his lolly fund.
All right, so when you got to the apartment, what happened?
Made some dinner, made some ramen. Do love how I make my ramen.
I do love how I made my ramen. Okay, that's such a dumbass weird thing to say. Is that what he actually said? I made some ramen. I do love how I made my ramen. Like, ramen isn't that hard to make. And I have to say, pisses me off that he's made ramen something that I'm not overly interested in eating now for a very long time. Now, given the story that we heard in the jail calls, the whole thing of him making ramen and Maddie stealing his ramen, I wonder if that's why he brought up him making ramen, because when they interviewed Jenn, she says that there was no sign of anyone having made anything in the kitchen. So, which calls into question whether or not he made the ramen. But it could be that the reason he's saying here that he made the ramen and that he loves the way he made the ramen is that he was hoping to lead into his little story about how Maddie comes over and what you making? Oh, ramen, and then runs off with his ramen, trying to establish that, we have this super, super close relationship. Because he knows he's in trouble here. So he's pulling out every strategy he can. So I'm thinking that's probably why the ramen story came up.
Then we started watching Sister Act, but it was time for her to start getting ready for bed. Her mom got home basically just as we were starting Sister Act.
Okay.
Okay, well, straight up, I'm going to say that never happened. I suspect that the making the ramen never happened. I'm pretty certain the watching Sister Act never happened. Why do I say that? Because he's claiming here that he rocked up, Maddie was off busy getting herself ready for bed, and then they decided to start watching Sister Act just when Jenn arrived home. Think about that timeline. Jenn says she arrived home around 10:30. We know that is true from the cell tower information. We also know that he arrived at 9:15. So you're telling me that it took him over an hour and a half, an hour and 3/4, to make and eat a bowl of ramen. And then they were starting to watch Sister Act. So this takes me back to my speculation in terms of Jenn not seeing Maddie on the Sunday night. And I do wonder if Maddie was actually already drugged and possibly unconscious by the time Jenn came home. Because this hour and 3/4 between when Stephan arrived and Jenn arrived, he hasn't filled the timeline here at all. How long does it take to make a bowl of ramen? 3 minutes? How long does it take to eat a bowl of ramen? Looking at him, he would probably inhale it in another 3 minutes. So that's 6 minutes out of an hour and 3/4. So what was he doing for the rest of the time to say that we were just starting to watch Sister Act when Jenn got home? It doesn't fit at all. That tells me that this timeline is wrong. Big question I have is, if Maddie was already unconscious when Jenn got home, and it appears that she may well have been in the upstairs room, based on everything that Jenn and Stephan is saying, why was she up there if it wasn't Jenn who sent her up there? Was she taken up there after she passed out by Stephan? Was she lured up there on the pretense of let's watch a movie, knowing that she would pass out before it was possible to watch a movie? And is that why he's coming up with this Sister Act story? There's so much missing from both their stories about the Sunday night.
And that was just about bedtime.
What time is bedtime?
Usually 10:30, 11ish,
Okay.
something like that. It's a spectrum, not a set time.
It's interesting that he does say that her bedtime is 10:30, 11ish, and that it's not a set time. I believe that. I think that's part of the problem with what was going on with Maddie's world. I suspect that Jenn really didn't think about trying to make sure that her daughter had enough sleep. And I'd also imagine that, knowing the chaotic world that Maddie was living in, there's a pretty good chance that she wasn't getting her nighttime medications till just before she went to bed, which means that if she's heading to bed at 11 o'clock and taking medications then, of course she's going to be wiped out in the morning.
Then, so who's going through the bedtime routine? Because I know she said she has somewhat of a little routine too that she does. Is it her? Are you talking about? Or
Routine is, taking her meds, eating some food so that she can have the proper calories for the meds. And then she's got about an hour to do whatever she needs to do because she needs to fall asleep at that point.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know why they bothered to continue to redact Jenn and Maddie's names, because contextually we can figure out who's being spoken about at what point in time. So what he's talking about there is, of course, Jenn's nighttime routine, because we've heard all that from Jenn before, that she has to have some food to get the right calories or something before she goes to bed. And now they're going to move on to Maddie's bedtime routine.
Her bedtime routine is taking her bedtime meds, brushing her hair. She should have showered that night, and then she goes to bed as well. Usually with some bombs or something on in the background. Bombs burgers.
So I actually don't recall hearing it mentioned before that Maddie would go to bed with something playing in the background. I think he said songs, but even with my headphones pushed up right into my ear, I couldn't quite catch what he was saying. But definitely that's interesting. And that could also explain why flatmates weren't hearing stuff going on. Maybe they encouraged Maddie to have stuff playing in the background so that people couldn't hear what was going on, which is a disturbing thought. Now, the other thing about what's just been said here is that this makes me even more convinced that Jenn may not have seen Maddie on Sunday night. Because what he's saying here is that normally she'll take her meds, she'll brush her hair. That night she had a shower and then she'll go to bed. Well, that's not a 2-hour process. Even if, as Jenn says, Maddie spends an hour in the shower, then she was probably in bed by 9:30. If that's how it went down. Which again begs the question of how come she was upstairs with Stephan. My thoughts there are maybe we should pay attention to the comment that Deb Sterns made, which I must admit I completely disregarded because, well, we know Deb Sterns is full of crap. But she actually at one point made a comment that Jenn supposedly woke up with a headache and sent Maddie upstairs to sleep with Sterns. Is that closer to the truth than Jenn saying that she wanted a good night's sleep and she sent Maddie upstairs? Is it possible that when Jenn got home, Maddie was already asleep in Jenn's bed and that Jenn woke her up at some point in time and sent her upstairs because it didn't suit her at all? Just another thing to consider. And I'm sure that information will probably come out in court. I think we will probably find the truth of the situation. The interesting thing with all that is that when you look at the various times that have been set in concrete in terms of phone data, etc., we know that Maddie's phone didn't actually go upstairs until 11:19. And then 20 minutes later, you have Jenn sending those text messages to Stephan, like Maddie needs to go to bed now. So, what exactly was going on? Because I don't think either of their stories that they've given are actually anywhere near close to the truth of what actually occurred on that Sunday night.
What are the sleeping arrangements?
Typically sleeps in her mom's bed with her.
Okay. Did she sleep in her bed Sunday night?
No. I was just back. I had been away for a couple months. I wanted us all to be in the same bed together. So her mom needed to get some serious sleep. So she said no to that and suggested that the guest room upstairs had a big enough bed. So we needed some snuggle, cuddle time that would suffice and get to sleep in peace.
Okay.
Yes, for the uninitiated, that is my other chihuahua snoring in the background. Now, it just makes me sick hearing him talk about snuggle cuddle time. So, it's interesting the way he led into it though. It makes me wonder if it really was Jen's idea. Because he's like, well, I hadn't been there for a few months, so Maddie, presumably, thought that we should all be in the same bed together. Well, I'm just wondering if he was trying to orchestrate things from the moment that he arrived so that he could get that easy access to Maddie. Because when you listen to them, he's the one that's placing the most emphasis on the whole, them having been separated for all this time and the snuggle cuddle bullcrap and it was shaping up to be a good weekend. And yeah, I think in his mind he sees that weekend very differently to Jenn, I suspect.
So you say snuggle time. What does that mean?
She does not like to be alone. She is extremely dependent. She does not like to be alone at all. She needs human presence around her. Simply.
Gotcha. She's right. She just turned.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hate hearing him say that. And honestly, it seems to me that it's just been convenient for him and Jenn to encourage that behaviour in Maddie, if that is actually the truth, because Maddie can never tell us if that's actually the truth. But don't forget, we had one of the flatmates mention that it was Jenn who didn't like sleeping alone. So, is this a behaviour that's been essentially taught to Maddie just to basically suit the needs of these two idiots?
And trying to wean her off of that, but it's been difficult.
Of course, we know he's only saying that because the detective has just asked how old Maddie is, and given that she's 13, it is highly, highly inappropriate for her to be sleeping with these adults. We know they weren't remotely interested in trying to wean her off that.
What about her father, biological father?
He lives in Kansas or Texas right now, but I think he's on his way down to help.
Gotcha. Okay.
Last I heard.
All right. So says you go up so you can spend her time, snuggle time with you to help her go to sleep. Is that right?
Just bedtime, yeah.
Bedtime. Okay. Did you stay in the room the entire night?
Not the entire night. I'm usually up and down sometimes. So I might go grab a drink or something, or yeah, I'm up and down sometimes.
Gotcha.
Now, when you compare this to what he was saying with his parents, him claiming that he was out of the room for a few hours. Basically what he's saying here is that he was up and down a few times. That to me, and that he might maybe go get a drink or something. We know Jen heard him go downstairs to go use the bathroom. Now he's basically giving an example of if he gets up, then he gets up and goes and gets himself a drink and goes back to the room. So this argument that he's trying to use with his parents that he wasn't there, it's not going to hold water, because in this interview, and he swore at the beginning of this interview that he was telling the truth. Of course, we know he's not capable of telling the truth, but it's going to raise some interesting questions if he tries to claim that he wasn't in the room for all that time. And now he's basically saying essentially that if he's out of the room, it's because he's just taking a quick break and getting a drink of water or something. Two extremes.
But you didn't at any point go sleep in bed?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so context, it sounds like he was asking him if he at any point had gone and slept in Jen's bed, which is what he said no to. The detective is giving him a good opportunity here to turn around and say that he went and slept somewhere else. And he doesn't take that opportunity. I hope his parents get a chance to watch this interview, because I think then Deb will see how much of a liar her son is.
Right. So night goes on, morning time comes around, and it's time for to go to school. Walk me through that a little bit.
Excuse me.
Someone needs to tell this dude that actually a yawn is not an exhale. Like, what a complete utter tosser. I think he was stalling here, because this is obviously where the challenging part of his story kicks in. If you remember when we watched the last interview, this is where the other detectives, Detective Tagler and I think Acosta, nailed his ass to the wall because he didn't get his timeline right. So he's probably feeling quite anxious at this point in time about trying to get the timeline right in terms of fitting the timeline to what the detectives forced out of him. He has to remember what he settled on, basically, to, in his mind, satisfy the other detectives. The yawn is both an attempt at sympathy, of course, but also an attempt to pause and regroup a little bit.
Morning routine. She usually starts waking up. We set about 3 alarms. The first one goes off and we let her keep snoozing.
Do you remember what time her alarm goes off? Or what?
Not really. Maybe 7:30ish. I'm not
Okay.
sure. Alarm goes off. We let her snooze about 3 times while we start getting ourselves ready. And after the 3rd snooze, it's time for her to get up for real.
Let's be realistic here. On a normal day, there's no way he would be getting up that early in the day. So basically what he's doing here is sharing what is the routine that Jen claims is her routine, and including himself in it to try and make it sound like he is more involved, which we know it's not truthful, because there's no way he's going to be getting up at 7 o'clock in the morning, given that he's up all night. The only time it seems that he's bothered to get up that early was because he needed to cover his ass.
Start getting ready. Typically, she will have showered the night before, So she needs to brush her hair, brush her teeth, excuse me, get her book bag together, eat some breakfast if she's going to eat there, and then we eventually make our way out the door.
So for a guy who himself is so obsessed with his own medications, you'd think that giving a description of Maddie's morning, that one of the first things that would come to mind would be at what point in time she takes her medications. But he's left that out of the whole process. He's also been very vague with she just gets her book bag ready, as opposed to Jenn talking about how Maddie supposedly rinses her drink bottle and then puts it in her book bag to go. This definitely tells me he's very rarely, if ever, involved in the process of getting Maddie ready for school. But one of the things that bugs me here is that they have not asked about, well, where does she brush her hair and teeth? He's said this specifically. Jen's left it out of all her stuff, but he has specifically mentioned her brushing her hair and teeth. And they've not asked that, which would give them an in terms of more questions to ask Jenn. Were you aware of Maddie coming into your room to get herself ready in your bathroom? He also left out the bit where Maddie puts on makeup. And we know from all the photos that at that age it seems like Maddie was wearing makeup quite regularly. I would imagine, based on the way Jenn makes herself up, that of course it was just routine for Maddie to put on makeup before school.
Okay. So walk me through, like, you leave, you take her to school in your car?
Yeah.
Okay. And what kind of car do you have?
It's a Lincoln. It's actually my parents' car because my car is down south. It needs maintenance, and we're scared to drive it too much. So I'm driving a Lincoln right now. Got out early. The plan was to get some McDonald's on the way. So we got out nice and early.
Do you remember what time you left, roughly?
Not 100%.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. My memory has not been super reliable.
No, that's fine.
So his adaptation here is, rather than attempting to give made up times, he knows that there is a problem with this whole timeline for the entire morning until he gets back to the townhouse. So now he's playing, I'm too vague, I can't remember timelines, I'm not sure, because he doesn't want to give specific times and get called out again.
But it was early. Maybe 7:30, 7:45, something like that. I'm not sure. I'm honestly not certain.
That's fine.
The plan
Was awake when you guys left?
semi-awake. I was giving her updates as we were going along. Getting ready, she's getting dressed. We're leaving now. Goodbye.
Now, if in fact he was giving Jenn those regular updates as they were getting ready, which it sounds odd the way he says it, like, I think you would know that that's what the child's meant to be doing. You don't really need the updates that, oh, she's getting dressed now, like she's a toddler. But let's just run with this. Let's just say that he was going in and giving Jenn regular updates. That would mean that Jenn would have to be awake enough. Think about it. If someone kept coming into your room and saying, oh, she's had breakfast now, or whatever it was. Oh, she's up. Yeah, she's getting ready. She's packed her book bag. If he was going in and out, telling Jenn things, there's no way Jenn would have gone back into a deep sleep. Meaning that there's no way Jenn would be unaware of her daughter going into her room to do her teeth and hair and makeup and get her medications. But it is never ever mentioned. So here, their stories are not lining up at all. And of course, the big question I have is, why is there no mention of the dog story? Is it because it never happened? Or is it because that was just an excuse that he gave Jenn for going in the room to get something else? Or is it because he entered Jenn's room looking for something else at the time that he came back, claiming he was coming back with a clicker? There's so many things here that just don't add up.
But she was sleeping in, so I was just giving her little updates and poking my head in as we went. But we leave the house, we start making our way to the school. I was asleep in the car for most of the time. We make our way over towards her school area. I ask her if she's still in the mood for McDonald's. She says no. She doesn't want it anymore. Okay.
The other detectives have really got him rattled. Now, he's not saying we made our way towards the school. He's saying we made our way towards the school area. In other words, I don't know what camera footage you've got of my route, but I've been questioned so much over my route that now I'm being super, super cautious about it, and I'm going to be even more vague. It's a shame that these detectives aren't pushing him on this. And again, we get him asking her if she was still in the mood for McDonald's. Why would that change? Why would you ever ask, are you still in the mood for McDonald's? It's something where you would just automatically presume that having agreed that you were going to go get McDonald's, that's what you would do.
Continued on. It was still pretty early though, I think. We still had some time to kill. It wasn't really time to drop her off yet. I had apparently forgotten my clicker key fob for the gate.
That's quite amusing. He's working hard to basically adapt his narrative to fit in with the questions that were given to him previously by the other detectives. So he's trying to fill out that time gap. He's already changed it in terms of that they left 15 minutes later than what he originally said. Now he's talking vaguely about we had extra time. But he says, I had apparently forgotten my key fob. Okay, why would you say apparently when you're talking about yourself? Because when you say apparently about something like that, you're relaying information that someone else has given you. Stephan said that he had apparently forgotten his key fob. That's fine for me to say that. Apparently he forgot his key fob and he went back. Fine. I can say that because, well, actually I can't say that because I know that he didn't forget his key fob. But let's say I didn't know that. By saying apparently, you're questioning something that someone else has told you. And yet, he's basically admitting his own lie here by saying, apparently I forgot my key fob. Essentially, he's taken on the role of the detectives or something and admitting that he didn't forget the key fob and it's just a story. Except that in telling the narrative, because basically he's telling his narrative now, I believe, from the perspective of what he thinks the detectives believe. So for him, it's natural to say, apparently I forgot my key fob, because he thinks he's narrating the story from the voice of the detectives, if that makes sense. He's shot himself in the foot big time here.
So I ended up actually turning around at some point and going back to the community to get the clicker. I had to use my parking sticker to get in for the guy to scan.
Just for context, they've already interviewed the security guard at the gate at this point in time. So they're sitting there letting him hang himself, basically, because they know that he didn't forget his gate clicker.
I had some errands to run afterwards, and I wanted to have my fob. But we still had plenty of time as far as I knew. So we did that.
Another adaptation, having been questioned, why would you bother turning around and going back to get your key fob when you were almost at the school? Now he's thought it through and come up with, I had some errands to run after that, so I wanted to have the key fob. Because he had also been nailed over the time frame of, if, as you say, you dropped Maddie off at 9:15 and you didn't get back to the apartments till after 10, what were you doing for all that time? So now he's introduced errands, plural, more than one.
Grabbed the clicker, left again, and that's when we drove over to her school area, and I dropped her off where I dropped her off.
Okay.
Those other detectives have well and truly put the wind up him. Now he's being so less specific. We drove back to the school area and I dropped her off where I dropped her off. In other words, he's got himself so muddled up in his head because of all his lies, and now he can't remember what lie he finally landed on with the detectives, so he doesn't want to give any specific answer.
You remember where you dropped her off?
Yeah, it was the stretch of road. I forget there's a street name. It was the stretch of road that the school is on. Make a right onto it. It goes down a little ways. There's some communities over here, and then up further there's a church, and then there's the overpass and the school on the other side of the overpass right there. I dropped her off on that stretch where the communities are.
Was she by herself when you dropped her, or was her friends there?
Yeah, she was by herself. She said she was going to go find her friends and hang out, wait for them to show up.
Okay.
Sure, Stephan, you dropped her off super early. Her friends were coming in by bus, and she was going to go find them and hang out with them. We know that's not the case because they wouldn't have been there till much, much, much later. Now, I noticed, and I find it quite interesting, the way that he's now adapted his narrative from having spent all that time staring at the maps with the other detectives. Now he's signalling with his hands to show his route. Now, were you unaware of the fact that he had gone through this with the other detectives? They had showed him a map and absolutely grilled him. You could actually think, well, hang on, maybe he's being truthful here. So it's a very interesting adaptation. And to me, that says this is a very dangerous person who knows he's cunning. He knows how to adapt his narrative to try and make it more credible over time. We know he froze in the interview with Detective Tagler. She basically got him to the point where he froze and he couldn't make up any more stories. But he's had processing time, and now he's being way more cunning in the way he answers.
It was still early.
Where did you go after that? Like, did you see her walk towards the...
I saw her making her way towards the direction of the school, but she was like kind of shuffle step. She was meandering her way there. She was rummaging through her backpack for something. I assume she was looking for headphones, maybe.
Now, he's just shown us the purpose of the rummaging through the backpack story, because as he said, rummaging through the backpack for something, he was actually with his hands holding an imaginary mobile phone. So, in his head, he made up this story to fit in with leaving her phone at home.
Shuffle steps, she was meandering her way there. She was rummaging through her backpack for something. I assumed she was looking for headphones, maybe. But as it turns out, she did leave her phone at home that day, so she might have actually been looking for her phone.
Gotcha, okay. What was she wearing when she left, or when you dropped her off?
Green hoodie, black shorts, black or blue, black shorts.
Now, we know for certain that he was the one that dressed Maddie before he put her in the car. So he was the one at some point in time who dressed Maddie. How do we know that? Because of the places where they found his DNA. So not only was he the one that was in possession of Maddie, he was the one who dressed Maddie. So he knows that she wasn't wearing black shorts, that she was wearing trousers. But he's basically going along with what Jenn said in the first interview. Now, he could turn around and say, well, she doesn't know. She's got it wrong. Maddie was wearing trousers. But he's so confident that they're not going to find Maddie that he's not going to contradict Jenn's story. And I find that interesting, that he's basically still covering for Jenn while he's lying to cover for himself. Given that he has changed his story so much, it's just interesting that he's stuck with the black shorts when he could dump Jenn in it well and truly and say she's got no idea because she didn't see Maddie that morning.
White Crocs.
White Crocs. Okay. Alright, so...
Now, at this point in the interview, they could have, in fact, been like, okay, we're going to arrest you now. Because by this stage, they had already retrieved the backpack and the single white croc. They'd also processed the townhouse and found the other single white croc. So straight up, him saying this is an immediate admission of guilt. They know that Maddie wasn't wearing white Crocs. They know that he's lying. They also, by that stage, having processed the townhouse, having processed the Lincoln, will have found the 2 pairs of black shorts. There was 1 pair found in the house, 1 pair found in Jenn's car. Sorry, so they would have processed her car as well, I believe. So they also probably have a strong suspicion that Maddie wasn't wearing black shorts.
She's walking towards the school. Do you continue straight when you leave, or do you turn around?
I turned around and went back the other way. I was watching her in my rearview mirror, and she was going the right direction, so it looked okay.
She was going in the right direction, so it looked okay. Now let's play this through as if we believe, as if this actually occurred. He drops Maddie off, and she's rifling through her backpack. And while she's starting to rifle through her backpack, he probably has to wait for a bit of traffic and does a U-turn to head back the other way. And as he's driving the other way, he's watching Maddie, heading in the right direction, apparently. So by that stage, she's apparently finished rifling through her backpack. Here's the problem with that story. Let's say you're looking in your backpack for your mobile phone, because obviously her headphones, if she was looking for them, are going to be no good without her mobile phone. And you're walking along, shambling along, in his words, looking for your phone, and you don't immediately find it. What do? You stop. You put your bag down on a flat surface so that you can use both your hands to move things around or even to pull things out. If I had a bag that was full of books and a laptop and I was looking for my phone and I couldn't see it, I would start pulling the books out and sitting them on the ground next to the bag. So him turning around and saying, yeah, I watched her in the rear vision mirror and everything was fine. Well, that doesn't even fit. We know it's a lie, but it doesn't even fit the scenario that he's given. And we know that at this point in time the detectives know this is all a lie. But I wonder, had they thought to push this a little bit further, what sort of story he may have come up with. Because his stories are never that well thought through.
Where did you go after that?
The next stop I wanted to go to was the vape shop. It opened at 10, so I had a little while, so I just kind of meandered around and eventually made my way over there to wait for it to open.
Again, his story's got mega holes in it. Now, we know that he actually only went to the vape store one time. He didn't go in the direction of the vape store or any of that stuff prior to returning to the townhouse. But once again, let's follow this through. He claims that he dropped Maddie off some distance from the school, did a U-turn, and then meandered around and gradually made his way to the smoke store. Now, looking at the map on the screen, and I showed you this, I think, in yesterday's video. On the far left, you have the Hunters Creek Middle School, and then the big pin is where the smoke shop is. And of course, if you head back off to the left of the screen, that's where the townhouse is. What's the problem here? Why would you do a U-turn? You would then be travelling away from the smoke shop, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And of course we know that basically he ended up over in Orlando near SeaWorld. So they've not actually clued him in on the fact that they've got all this footage. He knows there's some footage, and he's adapted his story to suit that footage. But he clearly hasn't realised that they know he's lying because they've basically got his entire route for the entire day, barring once he went along Old Hickory Tree Road. Although they later managed to pin that down thanks to the witness who saw him changing his tyre.
It didn't open when it was supposed to, so I left and came home, and then went back about an hour later when I was sure it would have to be open at that point. Got what I needed there, and made my way back to home again, relaxed and hung out with for a while. Seemed like any other morning.
When you got back home after dropping off at school, was home at the time?
I think she was on her way home. I think that she had a blood appointment, and we were both kind of going to arrive very shortly within time of each other.
So again, he has himself supposedly at the townhouse when Jenn gets back from her blood appointment. He's basically saying we arrived shortly after each other. Well, that's not the truth. He got back to the townhouse around 10ish, I think it was. By that stage, Jenn was in the car park waiting for her blood appointment. She got back after he left to go back to the vape store. He was at the vape store around the time when she arrived home. And yet, both of them have continued to push this story of being home together and hanging out together during that period of time, which I still can't figure out why they continue to push that. I mean, at least in this instance, he's not claiming or trying to claim now that Jenn was at home sleeping in when he got back, which he originally said. But why continue to push this idea of she arrived back a little bit after I did? Because no, you got back to the townhouse. You had the townhouse to yourself probably for about an hour, although apparently the flatmate saw him doing bits and pieces. And then he headed out again, and then Jenn got back, and then he finally got back at about 10 to 12, which was the first time all day that they'd been together. How hard is it to remember that? Was there something specific that he was doing in that hour when he was at the townhouse before Jenn got back that neither of them want the detectives to know about? So essentially, she's being his alibi. He wasn't doing something in the kitchen with power tools, because that never happened, because we were both at the townhouse together at that period of time, hanging out in my bedroom. Maybe that's what's going on here.
So when you got home, both of you got home, what? Walk me through the rest of the day.
Just hung out, chit-chatted. I mean, I don't know. It's not much to recollect.
But you stayed at home pretty much all day, or no?
Pretty much until maybe noonish or 1 o'clock. I had a few errands to run.
The reality is that from when he left at 7:30 that morning until when he left at around 1:30ish, 1:40 I think it would have been, he spent less than 2 hours at the townhouse. Of that time, he only spent 50 minutes with Jenn. That was from 10 to 12 through to, I think, 12:40. So that's why he's got no real answer to what they were doing, because they really didn't spend much time together at all. And he's lying about spending most of the day at the townhouse. He actually spent most of the day driving around, by the sounds of it. But note, he's still trying to be very vague. I think it's thoroughly rocked his world doing that interview with Detective Tagler and Detective Acosta, because we've seen in the calls with his parents how flimsy his lies are, but how readily they're accepted. So he tried giving the same sort of lies with the detectives in the interview before this, the day before. And of course, Detective Tagler just kept going at him and basically forcing him to readjust what he was saying, and he just dug himself a deeper and deeper hole. So his strategy in this interview here is to try and be as vague as possible so he can try and figure out what they know without dumping himself in it and getting in a situation like he did the day before, where it just became more and more difficult for him. Now, we could supposedly say, well, actually, he's tired because he was out driving around the night before. But don't forget, he slept all day. He got back at around 11. They didn't collect him till after 3. Well, so he's probably had about 4 hours sleep. So yeah, maybe he is a little bit sleep impaired. Sucks to be him. But he has had some sleep, at least.
But I wanted to be back in time for us to go pick up from school. So I just ran up and down 192. Ended up getting a flat at some point, which made me somewhere along 192.
192 is a big road.
It is, and honestly, it all looks the same to me.
Now, I did mention this in yesterday's video, but then there was a really good discussion that occurred in the comment section also. If you get a flat tyre, you know precisely where you got that flat tyre. It's not like, oh, well, 192 is so huge, so I couldn't really tell you exactly where it was. Someone mentioned in the comments section that they could tell me the exact location of where they got a flat tyre 5 years ago. And it got me thinking, and I thought, now, to be quite honest, I could give you a description of every location in probably the past 20 years where I've ended up with a flat tyre. Because the moment you realise something is going wrong and you've got a flat tyre, the first thing you do is start scanning for somewhere to pull over. So, you know, you are looking for a safe spot to pull over. You are taking in your surroundings. You don't just randomly stop in the middle of the road and change your tyre, because that's obviously not safe. So to claim that he's got no idea where he got the flat tyre is ridiculous.
So I've been asked, do you remember what plaza you were next to, what color? And I'm like, I'm ADD as it is, and I was in a medicated fog for the better part of a week. I'm lucky I remember what color I'm wearing right now.
The fact that this guy knows nothing about how ADHD actually works proves that he doesn't have ADHD. Because like I said, you have to look around for a spot to pull over. You're going to take it all in. Trust me, if you have ADHD, you are scanning the street for a spot to pull over. When you see that spot to pull over, as you're pulling in, you are going to take in every minute detail of that location. That's just how the ADHD brain works. It's wrong to call it attention deficit disorder, because it's pretty much the opposite. It's an over-attention. You take in everything that's going on around you. Meaning that if you have a flat tyre and you have to pull in somewhere, you're probably even going to be able to say how far along that pull-in bay that you stopped, or right next to what store you stopped, and the colour of the store. If you have ADHD, you're going to see all these things. Basically though, what he's trying to do here is he's throwing shade on the other detectives. I have this imaginary ADHD which doesn't work like normal ADHD, so I can't remember where I got the flat tyre. And these beastly horrible detectives asked me to tell them where I got the flat tyre, even though I told them that I have this imaginary ADHD that works in a special way. So I'm going to tell you this to let you know how bad and horrible those other detectives are, so that you don't turn around and ask me where I got a flat tyre, because I can't tell you that because of my imaginary ADHD.
Do you remember what errands you were running?
Yeah, I wanted to go check out some game shops.
Where were these game shops?
there's Coliseum of Comics, there's House Rule Games nearby. A lot of the Targets and Walmarts carry the game I was looking forward to. It just had a new release on Friday, so even though I don't have much in the way of money right now, I still wanted to look and see what the situation is.
It's always nice to window shop.
It is. And I'm a serial consumer.
Did he say he's a serial consumer? He comes up with the dumbest statements on the planet. Yes, clearly he is someone who has to have whatever he wants and will get it whatever way he can. Maybe that's the new definition of serial consumer. So he's basically once again just named up every store that he can think of that would stock these cards that he supposedly wanted. This time he's hedging his bets. He wants to make sure that he's not going to be caught out in his lies, and mentions that he was only going there to look, he wasn't going there to spend any money. Well, I'm sorry, but in this day and age, who window shops? Wouldn't you just go online and see what stores were stocking what? I mean, surely American stores work the same way as Australian stores. If I'm wanting to buy something, these days I will sit there and I will go through the various stores that would stock it first, online, rather than drive around. It's not a very credible story coming from him, I have to say.
So I was just driving around up and down 192, sort of just aimlessly, honestly. Just killing time till it was time to go back.
Again, with the killing time, it drives me nuts. Now, this is definitely a departure from his previous stories. Because essentially in his previous stories, he was going around these card shops and he didn't yet get time to go to all the ones that he wanted to because of his flat tyre. Now he was driving around up and down 192, just killing time until it was time to go back. That doesn't fit with this original narrative of trying to go between the different stores looking at these cards. Not only that, but he made this big thing about how he was so apologetic to Jenn for not getting back on time. Now, if it was so important to you to get back on time that when you got back late, you needed to ring that person and apologise profusely, why would you be killing time driving around up and down the highway just to spend time, basically? You wouldn't. And let's just run with this idea that Stephan has ADHD. Well, there's this common perception that because you've got ADHD, you're always going to be late, that you lose track of time. That's really not how it works. You're going to be either late or rather early. Why is that? If you're late, it's usually because you've become hyper-focused on something. So when I'm late for something, it might be because I've decided to do something, I've pulled out my polymer clay and I've been fiddling around with my polymer clay. And all of a sudden, I look at the time and, oh crap, I should have been on the road 10 minutes ago. So, yeah, if you are hyper-focused, you're going to be late. And that's why so many people with ADHD are late. It's not that they don't know how to tell time. It's because they become hyper-focused and they forget about time. But if you are not hyper-focused on something, instead you become I become almost anxious about being on time. I've actually learnt that if I've got appointments, not to do something beforehand that's going to get me hyper-focused so that I can be on time. The thing with that, of course, is that ADHD people get bored very easily unless we have something to occupy us, meaning that if I'm focusing on needing to get to an appointment in an hour's time, and I'm not going to start on something that I'm going to hyper-focus on, I'm going to hyper-focus on getting to that appointment on time, meaning that I'm going to do everything I need to do to get ready. I'm going to be ready super early. I'm going to be at that appointment 15 minutes before I need to be there, because basically I have hyper-focused on that. So if you've got ADHD people in your life, you probably see this. Either they are super punctual, in other words, they are quite early, or they are late. It's not very often that someone is going to just get there on time, because it's one extreme or the other. For what Stephan is saying here, there's no way someone who had ADHD, if they knew they had to be back at that apartment before 2:30, is going to just drive around aimlessly. You're going to go out, you're going to do what you have to do and get back, because you're going to be fixated on getting back on time. You would expect him to have been fixated on getting back on time because of the way he said that he apologised to Jenn. So it's just a load of BS. And of course, he's also forgotten the bit about the flat tyre.
Alright, so when you got home, did you and go pick up from school?
So I got home, it was 10 minutes later than I had wanted to leave to go get her. Just by 10 minutes. I called her and said, hey, where are you? I'm so sorry, I got a flat. She already left. She had been gone for 10 minutes. It didn't make sense for her to come back and get me. She likes to be the first in line.
Okay, bingo, now I get it. So people were saying about this particular part where he got back after his flat tyre and rang Jenn and said that, you know, he was late. And I do recall hearing this now, but I think where the confusion has come in is that some people think this occurred after Jenn realised, or supposedly realised, that Maddie hadn't come out of school. He drove in the back gate of the complex 4 minutes after Jenn drove out through the front gate, meaning that even if you allow 10 minutes for him to get into the townhouse, then at that point in time, it was still only 3 o'clock. It was still an hour before Maddie got out of school when he rang Jenn and claimed that he had the flat tyre and apologised. So people saying that he knew before Jenn rang him later on, that's not accurate. This phone call to Jenn would have occurred at 3 p.m, not after 4 o'clock. He only got back to the townhouse just after Jenn had left. So yes, he did say that he rang her. But at that point in time, that was before school had even gotten out.
When the kids start coming out.
Okay, then obviously wasn't at school. So what? Did call you after that or what?
I was already on the phone with her while she was waiting. We were just chit-chatting. We do that. We just keep each other company even if we're not physically together, you know. And she's like, where's my kid? Not coming out.
Okay, holy crap, wow. I just take back everything I've said. So now he's claiming that he was on the phone to Jenn for an hour, and we'll be able to see in the phone data, and I'm going to go back and have a look at that shortly. he's claiming that they were on the phone to each other for an hour and he was on the phone to her when she realised that Maddie wasn't there. And she's like, "Where's my kid? Holy crap." Well, for starters, we can be pretty certain that Jenn didn't go, "Where's my kid?" because she was so unconcerned that she waited 6 minutes and drove off. But this is definitely interesting. This goes against Jenn's stories. Because up until hearing this, the impression that we've all been given was that Jenn didn't contact Stephan until around 4:45, at which point in time she contacted him, and that was also around the same time that they called 911. Now, I'm curious as to what time. I'm going to have to go back and grab all the data. This is going to be a long video because I think I need to look at that stuff here while we're looking at this to see what time Stephan actually went to Yolanda's and to see if there is a record of this phone call. Because according to Jenn, she rang Stephan at around 4:45 or whenever it was that the 911 call was made, and then he booked it over there or whatever she said at that point in time. Him introducing this into the narrative is definitely throwing a spanner in the works. Now, before we look at what is actually contained in the documents, I think we should probably listen through this particular section and see how his narrative progresses so we know what we're looking for in these documents.
That's when we started asking questions, Did she go somewhere else? Did she know that you were going to come pick her up? Did she possibly walk to her grandma's house or her grandma's office, which has kind of been what she's been doing for the past week because her mom has started working a new schedule. So we started making all the calls.
Oh, I see what he's trying to do here. He's trying to include himself in that whole initial process. We started making all the calls. Well, nobody made any calls for over 40 minutes, Stephan. So what the heck are you talking about? Jenn drove to Yolanda's, went in, said Maddie was missing, drove down the street, hid out as far as I'm concerned, and then returned to Yolanda's office half an hour later, and then Jenn and Yolanda went to the school, at which point Letitia called 911. So what calls exactly are you referring to, Stephan?
No one had seen her yet. So that's when we started getting a lot more concerned and panicked. She drove around a little more, looking for her, looking along the walking paths, and didn't see anything. Went to her mom's, grandma's, went to mom's office, not there, waited around, not there, went back to the school, not there.
So apparently them making all the calls about Maddie being missing occurred in that 3-minute time span between Jenn leaving the school and Jenn turning up at Yolanda's office. Because he's basically saying that all occurred and then Jenn drove to Yolanda's office and then she drove all around the tracks and yada yada. Well, that doesn't fit at all with Jenn's story. So this guy is full of crap. If you've followed my channel for a while, you know that I did a number of time frame videos or timeline videos where I basically honed in on the timeline, and it really did not happen that way. And I'll bring up one of those slides now. Now, this actually needs updating because we now have information from 911 calls, of course, and also information from Maddie's teachers. So where I've got Jenn contacting Maddie's friend and Jenn contacting Maddie's teachers, those times are inaccurate. I believe they occurred after the 911 call was made. I'll have to go back and check, but they're inaccurate. I made a mistake with that. There was a bit of a lack of information too, so it wasn't entirely my fault. But mostly I made the mistake. So looking at this, we can see that Jenn waited till 4:10, and then she went to her mother's workplace, and then she basically didn't return to her mother's workplace until, and that's not on there, till 4:35. So we'll go through that shortly. Or I should probably go through this in a separate video. But 4:35 she returned to Yolanda's. 4:43 the first 911 call was made, after which the teacher received an email from Jenn saying Maddie wasn't in any classes. Jenn rang best friend, got told no, Maddie wasn't there. And then you have 5:03. Stephan arrives at the grandmother's workplace. Basically, it's about a 20-minute drive, meaning that Jenn contacted Stephan at around the same time that 911 call was made. This is the established timeline based on the data that was provided in the documents. So Stephan's throwing a major curveball here, claiming that he knew immediately. Well, if he knew immediately, why didn't he arrive at Yolanda's to 5:03? Because he wasn't making any phone calls. We know that all Jenn's family were already at Yolanda's office, or at least Yolanda, Letitia, Jenn were at the office when the 911 call was made. Who are these phone calls that he claims he was making? None. There was no panic from Jenn because it took 40 minutes before anyone called 911. He's simply trying to insert himself into the story here rather than be the latecomer who turned up at Yolanda's office an hour after Jenn left the school, or an hour after Maddie should have come out of school. If there is evidence of a phone call occurring between Stephan and Jenn for that hour while Jenn was waiting, and Stephan being on the phone call to Jenn at the time when Maddie should have come out, that dumps Jenn into it well and truly. Because then it just throws all the rest of her story out the window and proves that she's a liar. Of course, I'd also like to know, because it's my understanding that he did all that laundry in the afternoon. So he basically had from a little bit before 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, he had 2 hours to do that laundry. And yet he's claiming he was on the phone with Jenn for an hour. When would he have got that laundry done?
At that point, the whole family started rallying up and going to meet at the mom's office. And I think that it was around that time we might have called 911 as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Wow, so now he's also including himself in the 911 call, even though neither him or Jenn made any of the 911 calls. And of course, as already mentioned, he wasn't even at Yolanda's office when the first 911 call was made.
Going back to bringing to school, how was she like on the car ride there?
Just calmed down, sleeping. Just sleeping along the way. She does that.
How often have you how often have you taken to school?
Not often, honestly. This might have been my third or fourth morning school run. I'm not normally the one to do it.
So now he's dialing it back. It's not 5 or 6 or 4 or 5 school runs now, it's just his third or fourth one. Okay, but we know that this is the first time ever that he did the school run, even though he wasn't actually doing a school run.
The other occasions, has she had you drop her off in and around the same location, or how does that?
She has this image thing. I guess it's just a middle school thing. She only likes to be seen getting out of certain cars in front of the school. Her mom's is acceptable, but mine's, I guess, kind of a hoopty, and she's embarrassed by it.
Lincoln? What does her mom drive?
A nice looking Sentra.
I like how the detective there questions that a Lincoln, like you're saying that's an old clunker. Stephan doesn't correct them at that point in time and say, I don't normally drive the Lincoln, but I have a ratty old Honda that's falling apart, supposedly.
So, yeah, this is not the first time she's asked me to drop her off a little ways down so she could walk up and, look cool.
So you say she was conked out on the way there. You said you took her to school, or you were on her way to school, you needed to turn around to get your clicker.
Correct.
Was she sleeping then, too?
She was, yeah.
Okay.
It had been an early morning, so I figured it'd be fine to let her sleep in the car ride.
Here's the biggest hole in his story. She's so sleepy that she sleeps all the way out to the school, all the way back to the townhouse, and all the way back to the school again. So he was quite happy to drop the idea of going to Macca's quite easily. He asked her when they finally got to Macca's, apparently, if she still wanted it. Now, if she was that sleepy, then I would imagine that wouldn't she be sleepy even before leaving the townhouse? In which case, wouldn't you say, do you want to have a bit more of a sleep in? And I will drop you at the regular time rather than 40 minutes early. And either we can go through the drive-through and you can just take your food with you, or we can just grab something here at home. According to him, they left super early. Well, if she was so tired, why would you push a child like that to leave home super early? Just so you can drive around? It's a ridiculous story. And he really doesn't do himself any favours with the way he's telling it now.
Okay. When you got back to the apartment complex, or did you go in the front gate, or because I know there's the front entrance and then the back entrance?
When I came back after forgetting my phone.
Yeah. So which way did you leave?
I would have had to go in the front.
Okay.
And the guy scanned it. And I got in and got my fob and left. I don't remember if I left out the front or the back.
Yeah, sure, Stephan, you don't remember. He went out the back gate. Why did he go out the back gate? Presumably because he didn't want to be seen by the security guard again. The security guard said he acted normal, but he was probably worrying that the gate clicker wouldn't work again on the way out, and in which case he probably didn't want the security guard to help him. He probably would have preferred to have figured it out and just make it work, meaning that obviously he was going to go out the back gate rather than draw any more attention to the fact that he was driving around with a deceased child in his car. So, what a complete, utter lying twat.
Did you stop anywhere else in?
No. Not that I recall, no.
Not that I can recall. Don't you think you'd notice if the mission was to drop her off at school and you'd already backtracked? You would know. You would remember if you stopped anywhere else between there and where you dropped her off. Of course, what he's doing here is he's hedging his bets, because by this point in time, he's feeling a little bit discombobulated still after the previous interview, because they've got camera footage on him. So it's easier to be non-committal and vague rather than to have to explain why you lied. So he's doing his best here to avoid getting caught out lying once again.
Okay. Did you take any trash out from the apartment?
Was it night before? I think I did. I'm not sure. I took the trash out at some point, but I don't remember if it was the night before or it was the morning of.
So you can tell he's looking up and you can see the brows start to furrow. He realises that he's got to do some quick talking here. He's basically crapping his pants, because that sort of question isn't going to just come out of the blue. Now, dumb answer the night before, because February in Florida, presumably if you were there at 8:45 the night before, it would be dark, whereas in the morning it would be daylight. Don't you think you would know the difference? I think he realises now that he's up the creek without a paddle. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this progresses.
Yeah, sometimes we get trash bags piling up by the door. It stresses her mom out to see them.
Is there like a common trash place, or like is there a dumpster somewhere that people take their trash to?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that where you took the trash out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Watch his body language closely. He's now started doing that grooming behaviour with his face. He is anxious. He knows that they've got something on camera footage, and it's making him extremely nervous.
And you don't remember if that was Sunday night or Monday morning?
It could have been Sunday night. I don't recall. I'm sorry, I was in a fog.
Of course you were in a fog. What load of bullcrap. He has got the most ridiculous excuses ever. Now, when he said that, he's like, Sunday night, sorry, I was in a fog. He glanced up at the detective, trying to read him, trying to see if his story was being bought.
Well, okay. So
You can tell that Stephan is becoming anxious because you get a huge decompression sigh from him. The reaction from the detective? Well, okay. Signalling that he knows that Stephan is lying. Of course, Stephan is such a narcissist that he will have missed that cue and would not take it as a cue for him to start telling the truth. And of course, this is where we see a change of direction in the questioning, because the detective realises that Stephan is a lying piece of crap, and that this line of questioning is going nowhere.
supposedly they got video of her walking past the church or waiting at the church for a while.
Pay attention to the subtle communication that's going on between the detectives too. You can tell they're starting to feel a bit exasperated with this moron. And of course, now he's trying to be more direct with Stephan. He's like, okay, well, the whole questioning about the rubbish, let's leave that for now. Let's give him a direct question. Where do you think she is? Straight away, Stephan is reaching out and latching onto that story about the church, which of course at that point in time they know that's not true. They've actually had a closer look at the footage. They can see it's a dark coloured vehicle that dropped that person off, meaning that wasn't Maddie. It wasn't even the Lincoln. But Stephan doesn't know this. He thinks they're still looking at that footage. So he's going to grasp onto that and try and use that as his excuse.
And leaving.
How's your relationship with her?
Great. I'm one of her favorite people in the world. Even though she's not my flesh and blood, you know, I've always loved her as if she was my own.
One of her favourite people in the world. Seriously, Stephan? You make me sick. And then he's like, well, even though she's not my flesh and blood, I love her like she's one of my own. Well, I tell you what, thank the stars that this guy never had any of his own kids. Because they would go through the same trauma. I think you could pretty much guarantee it.
Yeah. Raised her as best I could. Co-parenting, I guess you would call it. I've known her for half her life.
Gotcha. Okay.
Raised her as best I could. BS. Now, we've had different versions of his role in terms of parenting, and I hate even saying that in relation to him. But on one hand, you have, I think, Deb saying he wasn't allowed to discipline Maddie. You have Jenn saying that he did discipline Maddie, him saying that he did discipline Maddie. I don't think he would have been anywhere near what you would describe as a parental role. We know the relationship he had with her was basically purely and simply a grooming relationship where he was like another child in the family, putting himself between her and Jenn and all the other stuff that goes with that. I actually find it incredibly offensive to hear him describing himself in terms of being a parental figure and claiming this co-parenting thing. You will note when he said that, he once again looked up to the detectives, trying to gauge if he was actually selling his story to them or not.
How old are you?
I'm 37. About to be 38.
You seem like a genuinely nice person.
I try to be.
Talks very highly of you. You know. So the morning that you took to school, when you came back to get your clicker, what was saying in the car?
She wasn't saying anything. She was just asleep. She was just reclined in the chair sleeping.
And now the detective's coming back around to the original line of questioning to see what other answers he will get out of Stephan. Now that was an interesting one. What was she saying while she was in the car? Well, Stephan's like, well, she wasn't saying anything because she was asleep. We know why she wasn't saying anything.
Okay, explain explain to me, like reclining backwards?
Just laying back in the chair.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, I guess.
Okay. All right. Stuff on here. I'm too old to lie to people. Too old to beat around the bush. And we seem like we're having a generally good conversation right now. Okay. The only thing that I ask for from you is, and I will reciprocate, I want you to be honest with me as much as I'm being honest with you. Okay. There's cameras in all over the place, as you can imagine. Nowadays, cameras are everywhere. Okay. So we see you coming in and out of at the guard shack with in the car. Okay. We see you go by the dumpster. Okay.
And for once, Stephan has no answer.
I may have taken some trash with me then.
What was in the trash?
House trash.
House trash?
Yeah.
And there's the first home run. He's basically got Stephan to admit that that's when he put the trash in the dumpster. Even though just a few moments before he couldn't recall. But now he knows they've got him on camera. He's got no choice but to tell the truth. But of course, he's hoping that they haven't actually tracked down the dumpster because it would have been collected. So he's referring to it as house trash.
So it must have been that morning then. We'll toss trash bags on the back seat, and wherever we're going on our way out, we'll drop that on the way. I think I may have mentioned to her mom that I took the trash out for her.
Sure, here's that genius IQ at play, isn't it? I may have mentioned to her mum that I took the trash out. So they basically got him banged to rights. We've got you on camera putting rubbish in the dumpster that morning. Now, hello, if you had even a quarter of a brain cell, you would realise that they know what's in those bags, because otherwise why would they give a rat's ass about you throwing household rubbish in the dumpster? They wouldn't. So, for starters, use your brain. They've collected that dumpster. They know what was in those bags. And it wasn't household rubbish. But he's so used to telling lies and having his lies believed that he's now trying to construct a new lie. And what does he do when he's constructing these lies? He throws in all of these extra details that are just totally unnecessary. So now he's adding in the detail of telling Jenn that he took the rubbish out. Really? I could say that the guy's got no concept of quit while you're ahead, but at the same time, like I said in yesterday's video, we've seen how easily he could hoodwink his mother with these flimsy lies that no one else would believe, and yet she bought them hook, line and sinker. And he's never ever been challenged on his lies until he comes across these detectives. And he just doesn't have the strategies to deal with it.
I'll have to double check.
Okay. Was everything in trash bags?
I'm sorry?
Was everything in trash bags, or was there any items that were just tossed along with the bag?
I think it would have been in trash bags, or maybe some boxes too.
Okay.
Some birthday stuff, leftovers. I can't remember exactly what.
He's so thoroughly crapping his pants about now. You can see him desperately trying to get some sort of confirmation from the detective as to if his story is being believed. The detective has asked him, was everything in bags? In a panic, he's come up with something about boxes, leftover birthday stuff. He's hoping that they don't know what went into that dumpster. He's probably at this point in time thinking that they only have camera footage, so they may not know what he put into that dumpster. But while he's making up these lies, he's reading or trying to read the detective, trying to get cues from the detective as to what he should actually be saying about now.
Okay, when you dropped her off for school, did she have her backpack with her?
Yes.
She did. Did she have her school computer with her?
Yes. Presumably, yes.
Presumably. Okay.
Oh my gosh, how incredibly dumb can you be? Is he really not reading the room? They have doubled back to talking about the dumpster. They've told him they've got camera footage. They haven't told him yet that they collected the dumpster and collected the items that he put in the dumpster. They're giving him a chance to try and come clean and tell the truth. But he's not doing that. Now, they're asking him, when you dropped Maddie off, did she have her book bag? Did she have her laptop? Stephan knows that he threw them in the dumpster. It would only take a quarter of a brain cell to suddenly realise they've found those items. And yet, he's clinging on to that last bit of hope that just maybe they don't know, instead of actually using his supposed genius IQ to figure out that they've got him banged to rights. So my question for Deb Sterns is, which part of his IQ is genius?
She should have.
The detective on the far left, I love watching his face. There's communication going on there between these detectives. I wish we could see both their faces, because you get these smirks from the detective by the far wall that is basically him saying, yeah, we've got this guy nailed, well and truly. And he's sitting there just taking in what the senior detective is going to do next. But just reading his reaction is classic. And the thing is, Stephan is such a dumbass, he's not even looking at that detective, he's just looking at the detective that's questioning him. So he's missing out on some important cues. Another thing which tells me he's not ADHD. Because if you were ADHD, you would be reading all those non-verbal cues from both detectives. Where does that come from? ADHD, sometimes there are delays in processing things. Sometimes if you are in an environment where there's a lot of extra noise, you miss a lot of what's going on in conversations. So from a very early age, you become very, very good at reading people. Because that's how you fill in the gaps of the things that you miss when there's other stimulation coming in that's preventing you from just hearing a normal conversation. Not sure how well I've explained that, but essentially what I'm saying here is that if he had ADHD, he would have been able to read the cues from those detectives and know full well that they know that he's lying.
Once again, this goes back with the whole honesty thing. There was things in that trash bag that got thrown away that probably shouldn't have been thrown away. Okay. We'll get that in a minute. But
oh my gosh. What an arrogant, narcissistic pig. The detective has just called him out. There's things in that trash bag that shouldn't have been thrown out. Stephan doesn't cop to it. He just goes, what? He wants them to tell him. This is in a normal situation where he would start trying to gaslight the person who's telling him he's done something wrong. We know that's not going to work for him.
Right now, our main focus is on finding where he is. That is our number one focus right now. Okay. Do you have any idea where she may be?
No.
None whatsoever.
No.
Okay. All right.
This guy's going to give himself a headache with the amount of frowning he's doing. His crinkle lines are so tight that even with this crappy footage, you can see them. He's not doing very well in this interview at all. He's such a dumb... I can't use the words, but I wish I could. And you know what I'm thinking.
Do you know treated you kind of like her father figure?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And sounds like she almost kind of wanted you to be her dad. And from what it sounds like, you were playing that figure, and something may have happened.
So I'm going to play that last little clip again, or part of that last little clip again, because Stephan's body language gives him away. He may as well have just screamed out guilty, because as the detectives, or the detective puts it onto him, what he believes has occurred, you see two things happen. First of all, there's realisation. Stephan's eyes suddenly go wide. Now, this from a guy who can barely keep his eyes open most of the time. And then, when he basically confronts him that something happened, you can see Stephan suddenly turn his head towards him. He suddenly realises he is screwed.
From what it sounds like, you were playing that figure, and something may have happened. Do you think anything happened?
I don't think so. I don't think what could have happened.
And suddenly we're back to the super quiet voice. He doesn't think anything happened to Maddie. He can't think what could have happened to her. In other words, he's going to make them work for this. He should be figuring out about now that they've got a heck of a lot on him. And he should either be squealing like a pig or asking for a lawyer. But apparently he hasn't got enough IQ points to actually figure that one out.
Okay. All right. Do you know anybody that lives in St. Cloud? Do you know where St. Cloud is?
St. Cloud, that's north or south or
East.
east?
East of Kissimmee.
Yeah. I've been out there too much. Yeah, I'm familiar with St. Cloud.
Okay. Whereabouts in St. Cloud? Like, do you know friends out there, or?
I don't have any friends really. I've driven out there a few times before. Mostly just when I'm meandering up and down 192.
Were you out there this week?
So he's been out to St. Cloud when he's been meandering up and down 192. Well, that sounds really familiar. When did we just last hear that? That's right. In the afternoon. when he was supposed to be getting back to the townhouse in time to meet Jenn to go pick up Maddie from school. He was meandering up and down 192 and he got a flat tyre. So he is subconsciously admitting here that, yep, that's where I was the other day when I had Maddie in the trunk of my car. Of course, at that point in time, well, no, they do know that he had Maddie in the trunk of his car. But he doesn't realise they know that. So, without meaning to, he's just basically admitted, yeah, that's where I took Maddie.
Yeah. Yeah, I was out there sometime this week. Sometimes I just drive and meander around and explore.
Again, looking up at the detective while he's saying that. Sometimes I just drive and meander around and explore. So again, he's basically saying, I was there the other day. That's where I went that afternoon when I was meant to meet Jenn. Now, I couldn't tell you where I heard it, but it was either a behaviour analyst or a speech analysis, a voice analyst, that basically said, we're actually not programmed to lie. So our brain basically fights with it when we try to lie. And that's why we get leakage of the truth. Because our brain's like, no, that's not right. This is what is correct. So I definitely think that him continually repeating the phrase meandering around in relation to the location where he basically took Maddie is leakage. He doesn't realise it here, but he is admitting to detectives, yes, I was there with Maddie the other day.
Drive till I don't know where I am, and drive till I know where I am again, and I don't know, just driving it's peaceful sometimes.
Alright.
If I got time to kill, I'll just drive around.
Given the context, that's got to be guilty leakage. If I've got time to kill, I'll just drive around. Well, you were just driving around, trying to find a location to leave Maddie after you unalived her. Major leakage there, in my opinion.
So you're saying when you dropped her off, she had her backpack. Presumably her school computer was in her backpack. And you described her wearing a green jacket, some kind of dark colored shorts, and white Crocs. Okay. Well, I can confidently tell you she did not go to school with her backpack.
How's that?
Because we found it in the trash.
Not only does he raise his eyebrows, but he actually tilts his body upwards towards the detective. He wants to know how much they know here. He wants to know how screwed he is. I think he should realise by now that he is well and truly screwed. But the way he is now leaning towards, his reaction there came across to me as having a tinge of arrogance to it. If he could find a way to gaslight them right now, he would. He would tell them, essentially, you guys are a bunch of morons if you think that I would do that. He's probably trying to figure out where to go from here. But at first glance, it looks like he is just about ready to try a bit of gaslighting to try and get out of it. Because, of course, that's the strategy that he has used his entire life. He doesn't realise that these are detectives and they are actually trained to detect lies and, of course, to detect all this BS that Stephan is producing. I mean, he might as well have a great big neon sign above his head saying deceptive, liar, trying to manipulate, gaslighter, all these things. These guys have dealt with people like him before. They're not remotely fooled by him.
So
That's brilliant. He is crapping his pants. You see this sudden increased blink rate, and he's looking from one detective to the next. Like, oh my god, what's going on here? I am screwed. And he's trying to read them. He's trying to see if the other detective is in on this. Which, of course, he is. Stephan has finally realised there's two detectives in the room. And neither of them are his friends. And neither of them are buying his lies. This must be when the panic is really about to set in.
Stefan, here's what I'm asking you and pleading with you is to dig down and do some soul searching. Okay? You understand? Family's pleading with you. I'm pleading with you because this is a girl that we need to find. And it's, as more time goes by, it's tough. I have kids, he's got kids, and this little girl's out there somewhere that we need to know where. And I really, really, really think you can help us.
And now Stephan is in shutdown mode. He's not going to give them any cues. He's going to sit there with his arms crossed, eyes down, not even going to give them eye contact because he doesn't want to answer this question. He's screwed. He knows he's screwed. He knows he can't make up an answer for this, so he's gone silent. But it also shows us how much of a narcissist he is. He claims to care about Maddie, but they have appealed to him for Maddie's sake and for the sake of her family, which of course includes Jenn, and he claims that he cares about Jenn. You heard all that BS when he was actually in those phone calls where he wanted to get out so he could care for Jenn. They are trying to appeal to his human side, but he's too much of a narcissist, so he is going to continue to sit there, not give them eye contact, not give them any openness with his body language, and not answer this question. Right now, he's shutting them out. He doesn't want to answer the question. He's not going to answer the question.
I mean, you want to get something off your chest. I don't know what it is, but I'm pleading with you.
I don't know where he is. I don't.
What happened with?
It's about now that they should have set Myra back onto him. Because I can see why this detective is trying to play the nice guy, but it's not working and it's not going to work. Stephan is clammed up. He's not going to give an answer while this detective is still trying to play the nice guy. Don't forget that most of these sort of encounters for Stephan have been with his mother. And that if she questions him, he just simply retells his lie a different way, and she laps it up and is like, okay, yeah, I believe you now. Stephan is less accustomed to being confronted over his lies. Now, obviously, the detectives don't know this because they don't know his family relationship. Unfortunately, it could have been beneficial for them to have known this at this point in time.
I dropped her off.
Where?
I dropped her off on the road to school. That was the last I saw her.
He's saying that he dropped her off and that he dropped her off near the school and that's the last time he saw her. But the whole time he's watching the detective, he's trying to get approval from the detective. But he's not going to get that approval because the detective knows exactly what has occurred. Right now, they know that Stephan has taken Maddie somewhere in the St. Cloud area. And they just want him to tell them where she is so they can recover her. He's such a narcissistic, arrogant prick that he doesn't care. This has always been about Stephan. He doesn't care if Maddie is left out there indefinitely, because all he's worried about is saving his own ass.
Sometime throughout the night on Sunday, did you guys have any interaction, conversations?
What, like fight?
No, I'm not saying fight. I'm just...
Okay, wow. Now, as you know, I haven't paid as much attention to Stephan's interviews as I have with Jenn's, because I can't stand this guy. He triggers me in so many ways. So I can't be certain if I've heard that before. But I don't think I have. The detective has asked him about interactions with Maddie on the Sunday night. And the first thing that comes out of his mouth is, like a fight. Now, one of the things that I keep going back to, because of the broken hyoid bone, and because of the accounts from his parents, where basically he can just snap and become angry really quickly. I had speculated about whether or not him and Maddie may have had a fight and that he actually snapped. And that's what happened to Maddie. And yet here, the first thing out of his mouth, when they ask him about interactions on the Sunday night, he says, like a fight. I can't help but think that this is a guilty admission. Generally, in these sort of situations, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is telling you what happened. He's not saying that there was a fight. He's trying to clarify what they're asking him. And straight up, his question is, like a fight. This again makes me think that there was some sort of fight that occurred to Maddie, between him and Maddie. If there was, when did this occur? Because I still don't believe that Jenn saw Maddie on the Sunday night. So if he's talking about a fight, it would have had to have occurred a very, very short time before Jenn got home, or it would have had to have occurred after they were sent upstairs. Meaning that, well, we know with the timeline and the rigour that she probably did die sometime after 11. Because otherwise, in terms of him putting her in the car, positioning her in the car, all that would have been impossible. In terms of him putting her in the trunk of the car, that would have been impossible. So, to me, he put her in the trunk of the car at 9:30. That says that whatever occurred after 11:30. When Jenn sent him a message we have Maddie's phone going upstairs at 11:20, and Jenn sending him a message about 15 minutes or so after that. She needs to go to bed now. Was there a argument or a fight occurring between him and Maddie at that point in time, and Jenn heard it? Is that why she sent him that message? She needs to go to bed now. It certainly makes me wonder.
Did you guys sit up and talk, or?
We talked while I was making ramen. She was excited about her choir performance coming up. She was singing a little bit. I told her it was pretty, or it reminded me of Sister Act. That's why I wanted to show her that movie. Just talking about a crush she had on the boy.
How'd that make you feel?
Fine. She knows she's not old enough to date, but I told her crush on. Get your crush. That's healthy.
To all those people who have repeatedly commented that they thought that the crush was significant, and I have brushed it off, saying that it seemed minimal. Well, I don't think I've necessarily brushed it off completely, but I never really took it that seriously until I saw his body language right then. He brought up the crush, and the detective asked him, "How did that make you feel?" And he was quite violent in the way he shook that off, saying it didn't bother him. But that was a really violent shake. And then he comes out with, "She knows she's not old enough to date. I told her," and then mumble, fading facts. Yeah, it's not going quieter, but it's mumbling. One of the things he does instead of fading facts is you get this mumble where you can't understand what the F he's talking about. The way he reacted just then certainly makes me think that perhaps there was an argument over her crush. He's gotten jealous. He's told her she's not old enough. You're too young to date. I told her something or other. She's got upset, she's got angry, he's got angry. And the rest is history. Certainly makes me question events of that night. So to all those people who called this out before, yeah, probably I should have watched more of these Stephan Sterns interviews, and I might have picked this up before. I still have serious questions though with regards to toxicology, because based on questioning from the detectives, based on conversations in the phone calls, I think there's definitely something that came up in her toxicology results also. Is it possible that they had an argument earlier on in the night, and then when Maddie was passed out, that he unalived her? Because remember, they did fingernail clippings and they didn't get any DNA or blood from under the fingernails, meaning that she didn't fight him. That to me would suggest that she was unconscious at the time. So maybe he became angry about it later in the night. Jealousy, possessiveness. I don't know. I wish this mongrel would actually step up, tell the truth, and actually cop a guilty plea.
Do you think, had she had any boyfriends in the past?
Not per se, boyfriends as however they can be early on, but we decided that she was too young, needed to avoid that BS.
Alright, being that she's too young, so she shouldn't be having sex with boys. You're saying?
She's all the drama in middle school and all that stuff. None of it counts. It's real. I just told her she'd be better off waiting till high school.
Okay, apologies because this is the long video. The pup is now wanting someone to play with him and is pestering the other chihuahua. So you're going to hear him in the background a little bit for a while, presumably. Although now that I've said that, he's gone quiet. Now, they've called him out here, basically. They've, said, well, if she's too young to date, then obviously she's not going to be sexually active. And Stephan, it's like he doesn't even hear it. And I don't know if maybe he didn't hear it because he was just on a roll with his whole narrative. We said there's too much drama in middle school, so she can't date till she's in high school. Now, I need a bit of explanation here. I think I've got a handle on how middle school and high school and everything works in the United States. In Australia, high school is grade 7 to 12. Or in some states, like Tasmania, high school is grade 7 to 10, and then years 11 and 12 are actually called college. And of course, in Australia, we call it, after that, university. But high school in America is year 9, isn't it? So that would make her 14, going into year 9. So where Jenn made up that Maddie couldn't date till she was 16, Stephan's saying she can't date till she's 14. Just let me know if I'm right with the dates on that. Like I said, because of the differences in how schooling works in Australia versus in America, I'm not 100% sure if I'm correct on that. Either way, Stephan has contradicted Jenn, and he's thoroughly ignored the comment by the detectives about, well, Maddie shouldn't be sexually active at that point then, should she?
Has she ever talked to you about boys?
A little bit sometimes. A little bit.
Has she ever, because I asked the same thing, has she ever disclosed to you about being sexually active with boys?
No.
Do you know if she's ever been sexually active with anybody in the past?
Not that I'm aware of.
When he asks him, are you aware of her being sexually active with any boys? And he says no. There is that arrogance again, the tilt of the head and the direct look at him. Stephan knows that Maddie's not sexually active with any boys, because he wouldn't allow that. But then the next question throws him for a loop. I think he's starting to realise that they've got a heck of a lot on him. He's like, not that I know of. And then he's looking at the detective, trying to read him, trying to figure out what's coming next. I think he knows what's coming next.
some sort of incident when she was much younger where she did something with the phone or a camera but got scolded for it. She was very young. She didn't know. She got scolded for it, though. I wasn't around then.
Honestly, my dog has a higher IQ than this guy. He knows they've got him. And yet he comes up with some ridiculous story about some incident when she was really, really young, something to do with the camera. But she was scolded for it. Why he thinks that they would buy that tosh, I have no idea. It doesn't even sound remotely credible. He seems to think he is smarter than everyone around him, and yet every time he opens his mouth, he proves that he's the dumbest person in the room. Who does he think he's kidding right now? Because the detectives aren't going to buy it. Now, we know, we've seen it in action with his parents. When he gets called out on something, he creates a new lie to get around it. And he thinks that's how the world works. Well, surely he must think that, or he must realise that these detectives are just a little bit smarter than him. And they're asking this question for a really good reason. They're not just randomly asking this question. So coming up with some random incident that happened over 7 years ago, because he's saying it happened before he knew her, why would they be asking you that? I could say grow a brain, but at this point in time, I think he just needs to grow even just one brain cell.
But it's vague. It's just remembering what someone said offhand.
Okay, so the conversation goes off at a tangent at this point, so this is a good spot for me to stop for today. And then I'll come back to it tomorrow. I'm not sure if this is going to be 2 parts or 3 parts because there's still quite a long amount of this interview left. Admittedly, there is, of course, that period of time at the end when they're stripping him down and everything. And I won't worry about that in terms of my discussion because obviously there's not really anything being said there other than when the forensic technician, one of them says, don't try anything squirrely or you will eat carpet, which I love. So it may only be 2 parts, possibly, we'll see. But definitely I will stop here and come back to this tomorrow because it is a good spot to stop. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your comments on this portion of this interview. There's so much to unpack here. It's great that it's no longer redacted anywhere. And there's certainly bits that either I was snoozing or I've never heard before. And some of it has changed my perspective a little bit. So I am definitely keen to jump in. I haven't actually listened to this prior to doing it for you. So I'm definitely keen to jump back into it tomorrow and listen to the second half of this interview and see what else it is that we've missed. I have to say, I'm going to be glad to finish going through these Sterns interviews because it does my head in listening to this guy. He's such a disgusting piece of crap. And I get so triggered by so many things that he says. Although it does definitely help to be able to go through and share my reactions with you guys. I don't think I could actually watch this straight through without being able to share it with you guys at the same time, because I think I would just be way too triggered. So on that note, let's leave it at this. I think we all need to go and just breathe, go and do something nice for ourselves, steel ourselves for the next round of this tomorrow, and of course look forward to some slightly less confronting videos when we're done with Stephan. That said, after I finish this two-part interview, I do want to address this whole thing of him supposedly being on the phone to Jenn when she discovered that Maddie hadn't come out of school. So that will be the next video after this one, where I'll go through the timeline and stuff again. The updated timeline, as you saw, part of that slide was wrong. Okay, so enough yabbering from me. This is definitely time to finish. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and leave your comments below. I am definitely looking forward to reading your comments and hearing your observations, because I love this community. You guys you come up with some really amazing things. You really think things through, and you really make me stop and think a lot of the time with your comments, and I really appreciate that. So I'm very much looking forward to reading all your comments on this video. So on that note, thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been